Hello everyone, this is the Oyster Mushroom Expert. In this video, I want to show you a very typical situation that many mushroom growers face sooner or later. This case was sent to me by a grower from Mexico. He is growing several species at the same time: blue oyster mushrooms, pink oyster mushrooms, and lion's mane. The main problem is deformation of the fruiting bodies and very unstable results from flush to flush. In such small grow rooms, it is extremely difficult to fine-tune all systems correctly. And the most interesting part is that using my suggestions, the grower eventually came up with a very simple and effective ventilation solution by himself. What we see at the beginning: the grower writes that, according to the instruments, everything looks more or less fine. Humidity is quite high, temperature is stable, ventilation is running 24 hours a day, carbon dioxide levels, according to the sensors, are within the normal range. But at the same time, we clearly see problems. Gray oysters have bumpy caps, and some caps start to curl. Pink oysters grow small and deformed. Lion's mane shows clear signs of balding. Why does this happen? Let us break it down step by step. Look how everything works. The fruiting room is actually a container placed inside a building. In the same building, plants are grown, so the overall carbon dioxide level in this space is naturally low. Let me show you how everything is set up. There is a separate small room where the humidifier with a fan and the air conditioner are located. So, humidified air with a stable temperature of about 18 to 19 degrees Celsius, which is about 64 to 66 degrees Fahrenheit, enters the fruiting room. At this point, I had an important question. Where exactly does the air enter this preparation room from? We will come back to this later. The fruiting room itself measures 1.87 by 1.87 meters, which is approximately 6.1 by 6.1 feet. The height of the room is 2.3 meters, or about 7.5 feet. Here we see the exhaust fan. Its rated capacity is 54 cubic feet per minute, which is roughly 90 cubic meters per hour. Now let us look at how the mushrooms develop. As you can see, the early pins look quite good. At this stage, there are no obvious problems. However, as the mushrooms grow larger, more and more issues begin to appear. I want to pause the video on this frame and explain what is happening. This curled cap shape combined with a thick stem is a direct consequence of excessively high humidity. In this other video, we see exactly the same type of deformation. And look closely at this cluster. In the middle, some mushrooms completely stop developing. Most likely, fog from the humidifier was hitting them directly, and they became covered with a thin layer of condensation. At high humidity, it is very difficult to track when the dew point is reached. Here, on the humidity graph, I drew a yellow line so you can clearly see what was happening. Humidity repeatedly rose above 95%, even though the grower initially wrote that he had set it to 90 to 95%. This often happens when air circulation is weak. Humidity can locally rise much higher than the target value. Later, the grower realized that this humidity level was probably too high and changed the settings. His Inkbird controller was adjusted as follows. It turns off when humidity reaches 88%. It turns on when humidity drops to 81%. Such a wide humidity fluctuation is also not good for mushrooms. I advise changing these settings because 81% is far too dry for both oyster mushrooms and lion's mane. Here, it is necessary to try to account for the needs of different mushroom species. Lion's mane and oyster mushrooms require very different conditions. Lion's mane prefers a softer, calmer airflow and higher humidity. Oyster mushrooms require stronger air movement and lower humidity. When you try to satisfy both at the same time, both suffer. Lion's mane develops balding due to humidity fluctuations. Oyster mushrooms develop deformations due to insufficient airspeed and elevated carbon dioxide levels near the surface of the mushrooms. At the same time, for lion's mane, this carbon dioxide level can actually be quite comfortable. If we also add pink oyster mushrooms into this mix, the situation becomes even more complicated. Pink oysters require a higher temperature than the other two species. They grow well at a minimum of 21 degrees Celsius, which is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Their optimal range is around 23 to 24 degrees Celsius, or 73 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. At lower temperatures, pink oysters tend to form small and deformed fruiting bodies, especially when other conditions are also not ideal. And just like gray or blue oyster mushrooms, they also require good air exchange. It is very important to understand one key point. Sensors do not show what is happening between the mushrooms. They only show what is happening exactly where the sensor is placed. The grower placed the carbon dioxide sensor both between the blocks and near the ceiling. It consistently showed values between 450 and 600 parts per million. But the mushrooms were clearly suffering. I immediately focused not so much on carbon dioxide itself, but on air velocity. For oyster mushrooms, this is critical. They do not just need air exchange on paper, they need active airflow around the fruiting bodies. The grower had an anemometer and measured the airspeed directly at the holes in the duct. As you can see, the values were very low, from 0.27 to 0.46 meters per second, which is roughly 0.9 to 1.5 feet per second. The holes in the pipe were small, about half an inch in diameter. The fan itself seemed powerful, but in reality, only about 11 cubic meters of air per hour were actually passing through the pipe, which is roughly 6.5 cubic feet per minute. In other words, the fan was capable of much more, but the system simply had no air to pull in. Even though both fans were running continuously, there was clearly not enough airflow because the preparation room had no proper air intake opening. In practice, air was entering only through gaps and door leaks. For this volume of cultivation, that is not sufficient. A fan can be strong enough, but without proper air intake, it cannot exhaust anything. I suggested making an opening of about 20 by 20 centimeters, roughly 8 by 8 inches, in the preparation room to improve air intake.
I also suggested rotating the duct toward the oyster mushroom shelves. This helped a little, but not for long. Do you know why? The grower wondered whether the problem could be related to the substrate, because there had been some incubation issues in the past. But in the videos, we clearly see that the substrate is white, healthy, and alive. The pins also form normally at first. All the problems start later, when the mushrooms grow larger and produce more and more carbon dioxide. At that point, the airflow speed is no longer sufficient to remove the carbon dioxide and moisture released by the mushrooms themselves. The stems begin to elongate, and cap growth slows down. These are classic signs of high carbon dioxide. The mushroom is literally stretching its stem, trying to escape from the accumulation of its own gases. After watching this video, I suggested placing the carbon dioxide sensor directly between the blocks, at the level where the mushrooms were growing, and the numbers there turned out to be very high. You can see that even near the duct openings, the values are elevated. But near the mushrooms, they are extremely high. This is a very important moment in the story. The grower asked why, earlier, when the air conditioner was placed directly inside the fruiting room, the mushrooms grew much better. I believe the main reason is that the air conditioner fan created strong air movement. In addition, the grower mentioned that there were fewer blocks at that time, which also means less carbon dioxide production. I explained this reasoning to the grower, and do you know what he came up with? A very smart and original solution. He completely removed the air duct and installed an oscillating fan instead. Wow, I did not think of that myself, and yet it is a direct analog of the air conditioner fan. Within 24 hours, the mushrooms improved so much that I even asked him to confirm whether these were the same mushrooms he had shown the day before. "Same from yesterday," the grower replied. Of course, the issues with lion's mane are still not fully resolved, but honestly, this is a task with an asterisk. I personally would not risk growing all these species together in such a small room. That is all for today. Much love and see you next time.